Hello there! Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever it is in the world that you are, and I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted you've joined me for a fabulous story tonight. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. It's freezing out of doors. I lie comfortably trussed up in my bed, tangled up beneath the magnanimous layers of thick bedding, to lock in as much heat as possible. But the ponderous presence of my large mountain dog Dallas, who lies at my feet, has become for me a sizable bed warmer that I appreciate on these long drawn-out, painfully cold winter nights, where I live in Alaska, otherwise known as the last frontier of the northwestern region of the United States, of which it is the largest state. If my husband were here, he'd not be remotely impressed to see that in his fortuitous absence from our cabin, that Dallas has been promoted from sleeping in the kitchen's doggy basket, large enough to fit a cheetah, to lying at the bottom of our marital king-sized bed, where his soft big head rests over my feet, and I love feeling him close to me. I hasten to say, if I could masterfully engineer a hot water bottle like Dallas to bring to market, I would be rich indeed, especially in these parts, as your regular hot water bottle would become obsolete, as Dallas provides an ongoing warmth that never ever subsides. Ostensibly, my cabin has become subdued and quiet of late, almost as if this inanimate home of ours can sense that something is not as it should be, and is amiss, rather like a chessboard that is missing one of its pieces, or a pack of cards that has lost its queens. If you live in this part of the world, you become fully acquainted to miserably icy cold conditions like this, and many don't cope with the perilously aggressive weather here. As a consequence, there is a high rate of depression and alcohol addiction in Alaska, not to mention drugs, as the threatening fearsome cold weather can drop to about minus 54 degrees Celsius in winter. It has also been known to get people to feel rarely downcast and sometimes ridden by desperate despair. I believe they call it seasonal depressive disorder, or something like that. I know so many people here who actively engage in light therapy treatments during the painfully dark winter months, to lift them out of their lugubrious melancholia, and some of them have been flung out of their depression so fast, like a stone in a slingshot, as the light therapy works remarkably well, and has helped many alcoholics kick their addiction for good, nipping it fully in the bud. If you go to other areas in the world, where they're exposed to much light all year round, you don't get the level of depression we find here in Alaska, which I believe is self-explanatory within itself. By all accounts, I believe the issues that plague most of us here living in Alaska are ultimately related to the light frequency here. It gets dark here during the winter months, taking a long time for the sun to rise in the mornings, that I suspect is part of the intrinsic problem as to why it's so easy to slink into a downcast state. Suffice to say, when days are quickly plunged into darkness, when so much daylight is cruelly expunged, it's obviously not easy for people to bustle along steadily with their lives, when they're not feeling their level best. Even though I've lived here all my life, you never fully get used to the icy Arctic temperatures in Alaska, and if you claim you do, I suspect you're doing a great job at lying. Predictably, I use the wood-burning stove in the family cabin, continuously burning away all day and night. It's designed to keep the place toasty and warm. I use the traditional heating sources that go back to the good old days. I also have an oil-fired oven that warms up the kitchen like an old English Aga, and I have a couple of fireplaces in the cabin. The trouble is, without the wood-burning stove being fastidiously attended to during the night, the fire quickly dies down, once it has hungrily devoured the wood and coal, so that all that is left behind are the sad grey ashes and the smouldering embers. This means, of course, that the temperature dips significantly, especially in my own marital bedroom, which is situated at the far end of the passage, so that any heat circulating in the cabin seems to unfailingly, wantonly abandon the master bedroom. I suspect it just simply cannot stretch that far, rather like a kid that cannot reach the cookie jar on the upper shelf in the kitchen. The master bedroom is not very big on purpose, as heat disperses too quickly over a large spatial area, which was why my father, who first built the cabin when he was a young man, designed it this way, so that keeping the rooms relatively small meant they maintained a cosy warmth for those cruel, unrelenting winter days that simply know not the meaning of the word mercy. Indeed, it can be so insufferably cold that you may want to hibernate under your bed covers like a black bear and wake up when the spring announces her illustrious presence. Believe me, there is nothing more spectacular and beguiling than Alaska in spring and summer. It's at this prepossessing time of year that you can be forgiven for thinking you have literally died and gone to heaven. The landscape is absolutely mesmerizing. The sky an almost perfect cup of blue. And then there's the signature of the brooding summits that ascend the sky like voluptuous shapely ladies, all wearing white bowling hats. It is spectacular to behold, making your heart melt like butter over a warm bagel. I have physically gasped in awe at the beauty that surrounds me at these warmer times of the year, and am ever mindful of the marvellous privileges I thoroughly enjoy, living in this transfixing, beautiful and idyllic paradise, which is both natural and completely unspoilt. Alaska boasts over 19 mountain peaks that rise up to 14,000 feet high, coastline, volcanoes, over 100,000 glaciers, lakes and highway passes, and of course, let's not forget, vast stretches of open tundra. And while Alaska may be intimidating based on its vast size, it will almost certainly touch your heart like no other place on earth. Getting back to the specifics of the family cabin, the master bedroom I share with my husband George boasts a magnanimous king-size bed, 2 side tables, a walnut bureau, and a large closet. It's a rudimentary basic room, I know, but I try my level best to make it look as homely and snug as possible by inviting colour to swathe the beds and placing some interesting works of art on the walls and rugs on the floor, always involving as much colour as possible, which brings brightness to our lives, especially over the winter months. I personally cannot stand drab works of art that offer little inspiration. My bedroom is a continuous work in progress. I keep adding more to it to give it that personalised lived-in feeling that makes the family cabin a sumptuous home, but I always avoid cluttering the place up, as too much stuff means you get tangled up in chaos and can potentially become a prisoner in your own home, enslaved by your worldly possessions, and I personally couldn't live like that. My daughter Ruth calls my fussing around the cabin as a natural nesting instinct. The birds might do it in spring, as they eagerly prepare their nests for their new fledglings, but I have been accused of doing it all year round, and I suspect I'm guilty as charged, as I love to make the cabin look as wholesome as I possibly can. I've had visitors staying in my cabin before, who live in large glamorous houses in Long Island, and they're envious of my family's small cabin. But I tell them that large or small, you can make any place a comfortable home, if you put your loving signature on the place, which is what I've done to our cabin. To all intents and purposes, one side of a luxuriously cosy king-size bed was until recently always occupied at night by the presence of my beloved, burly, big, tall, lanky, thoroughbred Alaskan husband, whom I miss dreadfully. He's like a big, cuddly teddy bear to me, and kept the bed so lovely and sumptuously warm because of his large size. How I wish he was here with me now. The cabin feels vacuously empty without him. Alas, his side of the bed has been cold and empty for 2 weeks now, and every time I reach out to touch it, I am rudely reminded he is no longer here. But to date I have no idea where he is, and the police are equally as bereft about his cryptic, incomprehensible disappearance. This enigmatic, perplexing and inscrutable conundrum I find myself in has been eating me up alive, as my husband would never willingly go missing or leave me to live out my life in this lonesome cabin all on my own. We did everything together as a couple, especially after our 2 grown-up kids left home. My husband George is used to working hard out of doors and overcoming the adversities of living in a tough, formidable climate like this. We live about 2 hours away from Anchorage, and so we do a weekly shop in town to refresh all our supplies. I always enjoy visiting the town, getting my hair done, eating at a restaurant, and doing a little shopping. Believe me when I say, living in the sticks like this is not for the faint of heart, by any manner of means. Many intrepid explorers have come to Alaska with the full intention of settling down here, falsely assuming that they can easily do it. I mean, how hard can it actually be, right? Sometimes the soul-destroying winters unabashedly defeat them of their good intentions and well-meaning resolve to stay here. So they scurry hurriedly away from our part of the world, like a pack of frightened mice. As Alaska is not for everyone, and I'm the first to completely understand that. My husband has always had the courage of a lion, the tenacity of a mountain goat, and there has never been much that would get him down or conquer his upbeat approach to life. So what happened to him, you may ask? I wish I knew the answer to that baffling question. He disappeared in the Alaskan Triangle region, which has an ominous reputation for people going missing every year, and no one knows what happened to these people, as not a trace of them can be found. But believe me, all kinds of speculations abound as to how and why these people seemingly vanish into thin air. The Alaskan Triangle is a site of unusual magnetic activity, so theories poke away at people's ideas, and many believe the missing were abducted by aliens or attacked and killed by wild animals, taken by strange cryptic creatures like Bigfoot or the Kushtaka. You name it, the rumours abound, of which there are too many to count. But no one has the answers, and that is the big problem. Some will say that it's such a vast tundra of unpredictable, wild, uncharted wilderness that it's inevitable every year for people to go missing in the Alaskan Triangle. But how do you explain those who vanish before your very eyes, which is exactly what happened to my husband? I feel in some way responsible for my husband's disappearance, as strange as that may sound, as I was the one that persuaded my husband to help out his friend Marcus, who was like a brother to the both of us, and so helping Marcus was like helping a family, and that's what you do out here. Marcus is a precious, beloved friend to our family, and is the godfather to my 25-year-old daughter Ruth. Marcus grew up with my husband in Anchorage, Alaska. They were bosom buddies from day one, both attending the same kindergartens and schools together. Marcus's family owned 8 dogs, and when Marcus was a boy, he adored animals of every kind, and had a special attachment towards dogs. He decided he wanted to work with huskies when he got older, to make a living offering sleigh rides to tourists, as well as teaching obedience training to dog owners and puppy training courses. No one doubted for a single moment this was the path he would ultimately take. He had never been one of those kids that wavered from being desirous to being a fireman one week and a pilot the next. It would seem from 9 years of age, Marcus knew the path he would take in his life. He would say to me unequivocally, "When I'm big, I'm going to work with dogs." Let's just say as a native-born Alaskan, the idea of living anywhere else in the world was nonsensical for him, as Marcus belongs to the Alaskan wilderness as the snow belongs on the vast stretches of sprawling tundra. My strange, inscrutable story begins when Marcus unfortunately caught a bad bout of pneumonia, which rudely confiscated his ability to work. He was completely bedbound, with sky-high temperatures, and an incapacitating weakness, which meant even walking from the bed to the bathroom was a major physical struggle and challenge. Naturally, my husband did not want Marcus to lose out on his sleigh ride bookings with the tourists and have his income significantly slashed. He had worked with Marcus's dogs before on many occasions, and he knew the quintessential ropes of the business, so he eagerly volunteered to help Marcus out, while he was otherwise indisposed. As you can imagine, Marcus was exceedingly grateful for my husband's help and intervention, which would help him not lose out some valuable income that the tourist industry generates for Alaskans every year. My husband and I have our own business that we run from home, so I could easily man the fort while he was away. People out here like to help each other out when needs must, as in tough times offering a helping hand goes a long way with the territory of living in an austere, inhospitable part of the world that can be cheerlessly unforgiving at the very best of times, and I don't say that remotely lightly. Let's just say, in the paradoxical case of my husband George, It would seem the saying that no good deed goes unpunished was alarmingly apt in this particular idiosyncratic set of profoundly bizarre circumstances that would leave us completely spellbound, bewildered, nonplussed, befuddled, confounded, and knocked off our pedestals, as we pondered as to what had become of him. I couldn't bear to see the pitiful looks I got from friends and family alike, even my own children, who felt desperately sorry for my plight. All I cared about was getting my husband back, as even though he was missing, I didn't believe for a moment he was dead. Others clearly thought he was, as I could see the sorrowful, doleful, woeful looks in their melancholic eyes that they desperately tried to hide from me. But I'm quick to read people's body language. I knew what most folk were thinking out here. Suffice to say their unarticulated words rang true in my head, as loudly as an obnoxious church bell that wouldn't shut up. "He's never coming back. He's never coming back. He's never coming back," they whispered rudely into my mind, without the spoken word ever being expressed. But those mute, blurred, fatuous words hung pertinently in my head, like the clothes in a wardrobe that you cannot wear because they are either too small or too large, as something did not fit about my husband's strange vanishing. I refused to believe that he was no more. I think the local folk were perturbed that I remained optimistically upbeat when I kept saying, "I know he's coming back, I just do." I think they thought I was desperately naive. Revealingly, even my own son Adam was tirelessly telling me to stop being so unrealistic. "Mum, you need to accept the fact that Dad is not coming back. You know this is true. You have to accept it. I know it's hard, but it's very rare for missing people that go missing in the Alaskan Triangle to ever be found again." "But I know he's not dead," I told my son. "If he were gone, I would feel it inside." "Oh, Mum, you're being so naive. You've lived in Alaska all your life. You know how unforgiving this part of the world is. It's likely Dad was attacked and eaten by a wild animal. I know it's cruel, but it's probably what happened." "But he's not dead," I insisted. It infuriated Adam greatly when I told him that his father was coming back. "Oh, Mum, you're driving me insane," he said obsequiously. "I don't want you to delude yourself. It's terrible to have lost Dad. It is, of course it is. We're all hurting very much. But we can't brood over his disappearance like this. We need to let it go, Mum." "I'll never let your father go, Adam," I told him adamantly. "And he is coming back. I know he is. I feel it in my heart." "Oh, Mum, what am I going to do with you?" Adam groaned. "You're a perennial optimist, you are, and I admire you for that, I do. But sometimes you need to face the truth." "The truth is, Adam, I'm never going to convince you that my intuition is incredibly reliable. It has never failed me yet. If your father were dead, I would absolutely, unequivocally know it in my heart. But I sense he's still very much alive. Why should I doubt my intuition?" Back to how my husband vanished. My husband George, as I was saying, was very familiar with Marcus's dogs, and knew how to take good care of them. And they responded to his orders well, and were attached to him, as second in command, so to speak. You could say it was no big deal for my husband to take over the reins for a while, and Marcus knew that his dogs would be in very good hands. "You're good to me, bro," he said to my husband. "I can't thank you enough for helping me out." He was not to know that this would be the last time he would see his best friend, and even when George left our cabin for a week away, I never knew I was kissing my husband for the last time. Had I known this, I would refuse to let him go. He had given me a cheeky grin and said, "I think I'm going to enjoy Marcus's job this week. It'll be a good change. Besides, it'll be fun working with those dogs again, especially Snowdrop. That dog, for some reason, always makes me smile. He's won my heart over, he has." Those were my husband's famous last words, so they continually hung around in my head, like an old coat in the entrance hall, that I kept putting on over and over again, in order to re-engage with those wistful memories that now had become as nostalgic to me as the memories of my late parents, who were tragically killed in a small plane crash in Alaska, and who had left the cabin in my careful charge. So undisputedly, life had been hard on the all of us, but we eagerly embraced it nevertheless, as that's what living is all about. It must have been on the third day when my husband was out with the dogs in an area of the Alaskan Triangle, bounded by the lines between Anchorage, Juneau, and Utkavek, that was once known as Barrow, which encompasses 10,000 miles of harsh terrain, with bitterly cold temperatures in winter and long periods of darkness, which is the norm. It had begun like any ordinary day, with nothing untoward in the air or any sense of prognostication on anyone's parts that would lend suggestion that anything would potentially go badly awry. My husband was taking these Scandinavian tourists, who were very good friends, sledding, or otherwise known by many as mushing, in an idyllic snow-covered area in the Alaskan Triangle, which was something they always wanted to do. The tourists eagerly explained to the police that it had been a particularly beautiful day. They were all incredibly excited about going sledding, and the upbeat mood was infectious. By all accounts, they were having a whopping time together, laughing and talking spiritedly, with their voices echoing across the long, sprawling white expanse of open tundra. Everything was going swimmingly well, and the dogs were probably enjoying themselves even more than the tourists, as they trotted in twos, one pair of dogs behind another, in a fluid musical sequence. They ran seamlessly across the snow, happily wagging their tails and pulling the sled along behind them at a fast speed that was both exhilarating and invigorating, especially for the tourists who had never been sledding before. The atmosphere appeared to be charmed. A soft ethereal light shimmered across the snow-covered wilderness, but the light seemed almost bluish, and no one had seen a mysterious light like that before, fluidly casting a bluish tinge over the snow-covered tundra. It caught everyone off guard, and although very attractive, there was something about it that made many of the tourists feel instinctively on edge, and ever so slightly apprehensive, although why they felt like this, they simply could not explain. All of a sudden the dogs began to whimper, and behave peculiarly strangely, which flummoxed my husband, as he had never seen such incongruous, unorthodox behaviour being exhibited by the dogs before, who were normally quite mellow by nature. Presumably, if such a strange event had occurred before at some point, there is no doubt Marcus would have shared the strange anomaly with my husband. Marcus had been sledding in these parts for many years. It was profoundly odd, as the dogs seemed to be shaking with terror and refusing to go any further, stopping dead in their tracks on the snow, with tails hanging between their legs and ears cast backwards. They began to wail and whine, as if they sensed they were in the presence of a deadly predator that might just tear them apart limb from limb. The dogs had a greater understanding and comprehension of what they were sensing, compared to the party of human beings riding the sled, that were a little bemused and confounded by the strange behaviour from the dogs. The tourists began to describe an inauspicious airy feeling, overcoming them like a tsunami of dread, not because of the huskies, of course, and their obvious distress, although I dare say that didn't help the sombre, bodeful mood the moment engendered, that had descended upon them like an odorous bad smell. The description the Scandinavian tourists gave the police investigating my husband's strange disappearance was that something was profoundly off. One of the female tourists, called Bridget, told the detective that she knew something was about to go terribly awry. She could feel a malevolent energy in the air that was so tangible and so palpable that you could almost taste it on your tongue. She said it was as if you could astutely discern that you were in abject danger, rather like a deer sensing the presence of a mountain lion, or a cougar perhaps, both on its trail, and you knew you needed to get the hell out of there. It would seem the sleigh dogs were anchored to the spot, rigidly refusing to move forwards, and their long hair was quivering and shaking. Bridget said that every nerve in her body began to spike with adrenaline, and her heart thundered and boomed in her chest, and the other tourists described similar feelings of restless uneasiness that gnawed at them tirelessly, along with a dreadful feeling of being watched all the time, even though it would seem nothing was visibly there that they could discernibly see with the naked eye. All of a sudden a thick, clawing, white, misty fog descended upon all of them so ruthlessly from every side, and came out from nowhere like a wall of white carpet, so you couldn't see a thing. Everyone became alarmingly scared, remaining nervously rooted to the spot, as they waited impatiently for the mist to abate. But according to these Scandinavian tourists, they were absolutely adamant that the mist felt intrinsically evil, and within the creeping mist they heard disembodied, haunting, unearthly sounds that were so spine-chilling that one of the terrified tourists fainted on the spot. She was unduly distressed. My husband tried to calm the tourist down, who was trembling violently like a blancmange jelly. "There's something in the mist! There's something there! There's something in the mist! Can't you see it? What if it's after us? What if it's going to hurt us? It's not good! I know it's not good!" The tourists said they could see blurry grey silhouettes moving in the mist like ghostly entities, and could sense eyes burning and burrowing into them. But it was all so ambiguously vague, so obscure that after the event they wondered if they'd seen anything at all, and began to doubt their own accounts and fleeting observations, which is what you invariably tend to do in a strange set of circumstances that does not fit comfortably well with your paradigm of the world as you know it. There was no doubt that something unfathomable was going on. One thing the tourists felt unanimous about was as if they were being surrounded on every side by menacing eyes that bored into them as a feeling of being watched refused to abate. My naturally inquisitive husband George called out into the mist, "Hey there! What's going on? Hello there! Can you hear me? Hello?" He walked into the mist, even though the woman that had fainted was crying out to him, "George, please don't go in there! Don't go into the mist! There's something bad in the mist!" But nevertheless, despite the heedful warnings from everyone, my typically mulish, stubborn husband decided to investigate, and no one was remotely happy about his fortuitous, rather rash decision. Everything went airily quiet, and everyone called out for him to come back, but my husband did not respond to them. The heavy clawing mists dissipated. The blue light shimmering across the tundra remained for a couple of minutes, and then disappeared, and my husband had vanished. There was no sighting of him anywhere, but everyone was adamant that something was in that mist, watching them, and whatever it was evil. But now that it had gone, it was almost as if it had been a bad dream. My husband was nowhere to be found. He had been there 1 minute, gone the next, walked through the mist like the curtains at a theatre, to be gone again, like a rabbit in a magician's hat that vaporizes before your very eyes in a wisp of smoke. The Scandinavians believed something was in that mist, and that something was responsible for taking my husband. No one could make any sense of the strange cryptic experience, and Marcus's sleigh dogs were traumatized for an entire week. But a week later it was like their minds had been wiped clean of their bad experience, as if they had no memory of it at all, which was also incredibly strange. The police had kept me updated, but the news was always exactly the same. "There are no new developments into the disappearance of your husband, I'm afraid," they told me again and again, and began to sound like a broken record, and the look in their eyes told me all I needed to know. It was unlikely they would make any progress on this missing persons investigation, as weird events like this had been happening here in Alaska for years. The stories might have been different, but the results were consequently the same. The person seemed to have vanished into thin air. A few days after my husband's rather peculiar disappearance, I was put in touch with a woman from Nebraska who was currently staying in Anchorage with relatives and had recently experienced something quite similar to what had happened to my husband, and her story also happened in the Alaskan Triangle, much like my husband's story had done, and the similarities between our two stories literally took my breath away. The woman's name was Jazz Fallenstone, and she had longed to visit Alaska, which was why she was actually on this trip. She drove down a long sequestered road, covered in snow, surrounded by vast areas of snow-covered wilderness and tundra on every side. The sky was becoming quite grey and overcast-looking, which wasn't unusual when the light begins to fade. There were 3 people in the back of the rental truck that they had hired together. By all accounts, Jazz's husband Paulie was sitting by her side on the passenger seat in the front of the truck. Unfortunately, he was not allowed to drive. He occasionally got seizures, but was on medication to keep them under control, and had not had a seizure since, so things were looking up in regards to his health, although doctors could not find the catalyst for his seizures and considered his condition a mystery. Jazz continued driving along the road, and everyone was singing happily to the music cassette that she had in her truck. Jazz was following the directions to a holiday cabin in the middle of nowhere that had been kitted out for guests with every luxury known to man at their disposal to celebrate Jazz's 40th birthday party. I gather there was a chef, a masseur, cleaning staff to wait on the 6 guests that would be soon staying at the cabin. As Jazz drove down the road, the long winding path ahead of her became conspicuously caught up in a mysterious blue light. But although magnificently beautiful, Jazz said the light gave her the creeps. Everyone was saying, "Wow! Look at that delicate blue light! Where did that come from? There's no way that's natural." And more to the point, what is it? Jazz's friends thought it was lovely, and were momentarily mesmerized by it. So enchanted were they, it was almost as if the light itself was having a hypnotic effect on them, as they were drawn to it like moths to a street lamp. It was hard to look away from it, Jazz told me. It seemed sinister to her. One of the women in the back of the car suddenly complained that she felt terribly queasy. "What's wrong with you, Rana?" her husband asked her, turning around to study his wife, who moments before had been enthusiastically bubbly and quite chipper, and was now bitterly complaining of feeling decidedly bilious. "You've gone as white as a sheet," he told her. "There's blood on your lips. How did that happen? Did you bite your lip?" "I don't know. I just feel a little odd," she said. "My stomach doesn't feel terribly good. I taste blood on my tongue, and I need to throw up. I really need to throw up." You could see she was getting close to throwing up violently. She was clutching her stomach and retching. "Please, please stop the truck. I'm going to be sick. I'm going to be sick. I'm going to be sick." Everybody was scared that the poor woman was going to throw up all over the seats of the rental car, because it was not going to be a good look, and it would be a hell of a trouble to get that smell out of the fabric of the car. So Jazz stopped the truck at once for the poor woman, who claimed she also felt as if her head was spinning, as if she was intoxicated and drunk. "I'm very sorry, Jazz, about this. I thank you very much for stopping the truck. My wife needs to be sick. There's blood all over her mouth. I'm not sure if she's bitten her lips or her tongue." "Thanks for stopping, Jazz. I'm just going to go now. Please don't come after me. I don't want anybody to see me throwing up." Scott decided to stay in the car, as his wife had insisted that she didn't want him to follow her. "What's wrong with her?" asked Jazz, turning around to look directly at Rana's husband Scott, with a bewildered expression on her face. "Your wife was so well a moment ago, garrulously chatting away so happily. How can she suddenly be so sick like this? Did she eat something dodgy?" "I've no idea," said Scott. "But tomorrow, let me tell you, she's going straight to the doctor. I mean, she's bringing out blood. Either that or she bit her tongue or lips. I'm hoping it's the latter." "Maybe when she gets back into my truck we should take her to the emergency centre right away. Turn around, even if it means taking a long journey back to the nearest town," said Jazz. "You don't want to delay something like this, if she's spewing up blood, I mean, because that's not a good sign." So there we are. That's the end of part 1. Isn't it exciting? I love mysterious stories like this. I don't know about you. Until next time, goodbye and good night. So I'll see you tomorrow night then.